Thomas Jefferson wrote, "If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continents their fathers occupied."
See, what the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 did was give this private banking cartel a total monopoly of printing money. So what you had here was a complete takeover of the government of the United States by these private bankers. They've owned it ever since.
100 years after Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln was pondering the same issues when he said, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency. Creating and issuing money is the supreme prerogative of government and its greatest creative opportunity. Adopting these principles will save the taxpayers immense sums of interest, and money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity."
Every $100 bill which the Federal Reserve System prints and is sold to the United States at full face value represents a $100 loan. Even though the government pays for it, they still pay interest, and it becomes, that's what your $4 trillion debt is, are the Federal Reserve notes.
What do the fears expressed by Jefferson and Lincoln have to do with today's murmurings about something called the New World Order?
And incidentally, it was Woodrow Wilson who first proclaimed the New World Order. It was the creation of the Federal Reserve that put the cap on this whole revolution, because that's what it was. It was a revolution that overthrew the traditional American system, the traditional government of the United States.
There is a controversy raging everywhere in America today. Everywhere, that is, except in our major media. A controversy that goes to the very heart of who we are. Are we citizens of the greatest democracy on the face of the earth? Are we captains of our own fate? Or are we merely pawns in the geopolitical strategies of shadowy international financiers? Financiers that may even control our own Federal Reserve. Do groups like the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Federal Reserve control what happens here in America? Tonight we're going to see some evidence that they might. Tonight we're going to see some evidence that there may just be masters of the universe.
Tonight we will visit the scene of a crime so perfect that for almost 30 years no one knew that it had even taken place. The secret birth of a criminal conspiracy to rob not just one, but each and every bank vault in America, all at the same time. And in between, we've got wars, assassinations, and Martians. In fact, if it weren't for the Martians, you might have heard about this mother of all conspiracies long ago. At precisely 8 p.m. on the evening of October 30th, 1938, the Mercury Radio Network interrupts the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra for a special news bulletin. A huge flaming object believed to be a meteorite fallen on a farm near Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Moments later comes a correction. It's not a meteorite, no, but incredibly, Martian cylinders falling all over the country. The famous War of the Worlds broadcast has begun.
Welcome to California.
With its terrifyingly real descriptions of an invasion from Mars, and before the night is out, 1 million people will run panicked into the streets. But what has been, for almost 50 years, a closely guarded secret is this. Orson Welles' broadcast was no mere show business stunt. It was an experiment in fear, a psychological warfare test conducted for the Rockefeller Foundation. And when the results were published 2 years later, they were available to only a few well-chosen people. An elite whose very existence is denied in our mainstream media, who, safely hidden behind the curtain of history, may be pulling the strings of our government, our press, and even our Federal Reserve, may indeed be the masters of the universe.
When you wave the white flag, you want to be friends? Hey there! Open up! Come on out! We're friends! Yeah?
The psychological warfare test, which we discovered in Orson Welles' broadcast, is crucial to any understanding of why some people feel that elite institutions like the Federal Reserve, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Bilderbergers pulled the strings that we all dance on.
The people who call conspiracy theorists are not the conspiracy theorists themselves, so to speak. So it's we're talking about facts. We're talking about facts here. The Bilderberg Group does exist. The Federal Reserve does exist. The people who are members of the Bilderberg Group are also the people who do control the Federal Reserve. These are all facts.
If a group can effectively control national governments, multinational corporations, and even our perceptions, they control the world.
But the real founder, I believe, of the Bilderbergers was another man that I met through Jack Hines, C.D. Jackson. And C.D. Jackson was the then publisher of Life magazine. He had been publisher of Fortune some years before. And in between, he, for 4 or 5 years, was the equivalent of being the head of the National Security Council in the White House under Eisenhower. He was the chief of psychological warfare.
It all began here. This is Jekyll Island, just off the coast of Georgia, where the immensely rich industrialist J.P. Morgan established the hotel behind us. Here is where representatives of the great banking houses of the world, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Kuhn Loeb, and House of Morgan, met in secret to establish the Federal Reserve.
The Jekyll Island story is one of the great untold stories of the 20th century. And it was these bankers who got together, left Hoboken in a sealed train with the shades pulled down, and the reporters were going crazy. They knew this was big. These were 5 of the biggest bankers in the world getting on this sealed train. The reporters wanted to know what the hell was going on. They wouldn't talk to them. The train pulled out of the station, left the reporters there, and they didn't know for years what had happened.
It is the urging of the famous poet Ezra Pound that sets Mullins on his lifetime quest for the truth about the origins of the Federal Reserve. In the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., Mullins starts looking for clues.
Ezra Pound's young artists and writers friends were killed during World War I. Ezra wanted to know why they died. Digging book by book, row by row, in the entire economics section of the Library of Congress, I found this little magazine with the Jekyll Island story in it. When I took that to Ezra Pound, he was so thrilled. It was the biggest discovery of his life. He said, "You have uncovered the biggest detective story of the 20th century."
Why does Pound call Mullins' investigation the biggest detective story of the 20th century?
Because I was tracking criminals. This is a criminal conspiracy. The Federal Reserve System, because of the way it originated as a secret conspiracy at Jekyll Island, in law, when any people meet together to plot to rob somebody, that becomes a criminal operation. It can never be anything else. Throughout its subsequent history, it can never overcome that initial criminal beginning. And that's where we are today, a criminal syndicate. That's all it is. It's all it ever has been.